According to the National Library of Medicine, on average, 7,000 people die a day from various illnesses, many of these people dying from lengthy terminal illnesses. Some of these people would like to die with more control, dignity, and less suffering. This is where assisted suicide comes in. According to Oxford Dictionary, assisted suicide is suicide effected with the assistance of another person, in this case, a doctor in a medical setting. As of 2025, 10 U.S. states and Washington, D.C. allow assisted suicide with heavy regulations. The end-of-life process can be both long and painful for the person dying and their family. This is my mom, Jamie, who went through this process about 2 years ago with a parent, and where assisted suicide was not an option. She is here to talk about her experience and the moral and ethical problems with not allowing assisted suicide. For our first question, it is, what is the experience you had at the end-of-life measures?
So his name was Steve, and he had spent the previous couple of years in very declining health. He had lost a lot of his independence, and then in the last couple of months he had gone downhill very quickly, and it became very clear that his time with us was coming to an end. When we made the decision to not offer the options to sustain life, in my mind, before that, taking someone off of life-supporting measures was always, you take someone off of a machine that is keeping them alive, that no longer happens, and so then they're no longer breathing and they pass. Steve was not on a ventilator, and so it was a very different process, and it was very eye-opening. So instead of removing oxygen, and when they take someone off of oxygen, you pass away very quickly because you can't survive too long without it. But in Steve's case, his body was able to breathe on its own. So removing life-sustaining measures in his case was to remove his feeding tube, so he was no longer receiving nourishment, and more importantly, removing his IV, which was providing hydration. So your body can't go very long without oxygen. It can go far longer without food and water. Water being the key factor here. So what happens is you remove those things that sustain life, and the body starts to shut down. Removing his feeding tube probably didn't play a whole lot into it, because your body can go significantly longer without food. Removing the hydration, however, drastically different scenario. But removing water is not a quick death. And so it is a process that took about 3 days. And over the course of this 3 days, what is happening is your body isn't able to flush out toxins. You're not providing the cells the water that they need. So his skin tone changed. His lips became very dry. His organs start shutting down because all of those things need water. And it was a painful thing to watch happen. And I think what I kept going back to was, as you know, we've had pets that have gotten older, and it got to the point where they were very clearly in pain. And at that point, we view the humane thing to do is to take them in and end their suffering. With people, it's very different. And most states don't allow us to make that same decision and say, this life is reached its end. There is no chance of recovery. There's no chance that Steve is going to pull through. So we're going to do the humane thing and end his suffering in a painless, peaceful way. So, in order to not end a life, we rephrase that in a way and say we are just not offering life-sustaining measures. So instead of ending his life, we are going to starve and dehydrate him. And it was painful to watch him go through this. It was painful to be a part of. It was something that I wasn't emotionally prepared for.
I can imagine.
TV and movies do not give you an accurate representation of what that's like. It's not just a calm, peaceful, they take their last breath. Steve had no ability to swallow. He was choking because his mouth and his throat were very dry. And honestly, the only reason I'm able to talk about this now at all is because I went through a lot of therapy afterwards, because I was not emotionally prepared for just how cruel and inhumane the process is.
That does sound absolutely awful to go through.
It was not ideal.
I can imagine. What were the options you were given for his comfort?
So, when you make that decision and those, the tubes are removed, they offer a couple of things. He was given regular morphine. We were given, it's kind of like a Q-tip with a little sponge on the end that we were allowed to dab on his lips, but they don't want you to put it in his mouth because they don't want hydration. We also found that putting it in his mouth wasn't great because his tongue was kind of like sandpaper, and the sponge would just stick to it, and you would have to like peel this.
Sounds awful.
It was awful. But they did that. And I have to say that the nurses were absolutely fantastic. And I think a lot of what they are shooting for is not comfort of the patient, but probably calmness of the patient when he seems agitated. They give him things to calm him, but more so comfort for the family. And so the nurses spent a lot of time talking to us, encouraging us to sit with him, hold his hand, talk to him, assume that he can still hear us. I spent a lot of time with Steve, playing his favorite music, and he loved Westerns, so there was a Western on TV, and the sound didn't work, so I was narrating as poorly as I could.
He did like his Westerns.
He did.
I never went over and didn't have a Western.
Didn't have a Western on. But I think the nurses are there to encourage you to spend that time talking to the person who's passing. But I think they're shooting more for the comfort of the family, because it's a very hard, painful process to watch, and his last breaths were not at all what I was expecting. I was expecting him to just take his last breath and that would be it, and it was a very uncomfortable passing for him. It was not calm and peaceful. So it was, I think the nurses do the best they can, and their hands are tied, and one of the nurses that we had in particular was when you move the body, it can be very stressful, and it can, I don't want to say speed the process up, but moving the body is stressful on the organs. And so I think that they were very good about going in and manipulating his body as much as possible to speed the process up. But there's very little that legally they are able to do.
But I'm really sorry for that. The last question we have today is, how would legalizing assisted death affect this situation?
So I think legalizing assisted death would be helpful in the same way that when it is time to let our pets go, we are able to go in there and be with them and say goodbye. And the process for ending the life of Tori was 20 minutes, half hour for me to go in and say goodbye. And, doing that was incredibly difficult, but her passing was calm and quiet and peaceful. And it wasn't drawn out for almost 3 days. I think it allows the family to have some control, to be able to know when the finality of it, and to be able to hold hands. For Steve, I had this assumption that it would be a couple of hours, and it wasn't. And so I firmly believe that people should not die alone, and I believe our pets should not die alone, which is why no matter how hard it is and how much it hurts, I'm gonna be there and I'm gonna hold them. And I did that with Steve, but they can't tell you how long it's gonna take. And so I spent 3 days sitting at his bedside, which is physically and emotionally exhausting.
I'd imagine.
It's emotionally damaging, and I think that if we were to admit that when we are taking someone off of life-sustaining measures, we are sentencing that life to termination.
Yes.
So when we take Steve off, we know he is going to die, that this is his time. And if we were to allow a more assisted death, we could do it in a way that is more dignified, is less emotionally damaging, is less inhumane and cruel. Because if we were to terminate the life of our pets the way that we do humans, we would be fined. You can serve jail time. You can lose the right to have pets, because it is cruel and inhumane to cut off food and water.
It is.
And that is the choice that we are making with our human lives.
I do very much agree that the way that we treat end-of-life care, especially with terminal illness, is unfair and unjust.
Yeah, I think that if we are at a point that a doctor is saying it is acceptable for us to quit administering food, oxygen, and water, then we are very much saying we understand that this life will be terminated. And at that point, I think doing it in the calmest, most humane way possible is the way that we should be doing it. And that is not how it is handled. And until I dealt with Steve's passing, I had no idea. And I don't think that a lot of people do know until you go through something.
It is a very shocking reality.
It is a very shocking reality. It is a very painful reality.
Well, thank you very much for letting me interview you. I appreciate all the input and you sharing your story.
Happy to help.